Welcome to Outdrive, folks. I'm your host, Cliff Callis, and each week I'm bringing you actionable marketing insights you can apply to reach, connect with, and convert rural American consumers. Outdrive is powered by Callis, a full-service advertising agency with a focus on marketing rural America. Callis offers a wide range of integrated marketing services, including website development, search engine marketing, social media, video, and digital. We develop strategic and creative campaigns to build your brand and your business, and you can learn more about us at ecallis.com. Now join me in the front seat as we head out on the road to success. Let's go. Hey folks, welcome to Outdrive. We've got another great story to share with you today about life and work in rural America. Agriculture is the largest industry in the state of Missouri. And there are tons of ways to be involved in this dynamic and ever-changing way of life. Our guest today has years of experience running a successful business that focuses on agriculture. He also owns farmland and lives the rural America lifestyle. Bub Caldwell, or Bub as he's known by many, is the president of W.B. Young, a manufacturer and distributor of grain storage, handling, drying, and processing equipment. They've been Missouri's premier grain handling specialist since 1959, and their home is on Highway 65 on the south side of Marshall, Missouri. Listen in for insight about the manufacturing business, how they market their products, the future of the ag industry, and Bub's perspective on living in rural America. Welcome to Outdrive, Bub.
Thanks, Cliff. Thanks for having me. Thought it'd be interesting.
I agree. I'm looking forward to it. Have been for quite a while. You and I have known each other for several years. And I'm excited to talk about your business and some of your interests in the ag industry. And I want to talk about rural America. And I know how you like and enjoy living out here. I want to talk a little bit about how you market your products and services. But let's start by telling our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, why don't I start by giving you a little bit of family history, and that'll lead into how the company got going and I got where I am. And so on my mother's side, my great-grandparents brought my grandparents over from Germany, and there was like 7 brothers. They all settled around Appleton City and Windsor, not very far from you or me. And my grandfather got into the construction business, and back then they traveled to different towns to do the jobs. He was in commercial construction. And he ended up having a couple jobs in Marshall and ended up staying in Marshall. And he built a lot of big commercial buildings here in Marshall. He built some churches. He built the jail. He built part of the power plant. He built the airport terminal building and on and on and on. And on my father's side, he was from California. In World War II, he was enlisted in the Navy. And believe it or not, they shipped the future sailors from California to Missouri Valley College for training. And I'm not sure how all that happened, but there was all kinds of Navy people stationed at Missouri Valley College here in Marshall. And every day at lunch, they'd put on their bright uniforms and march up Odell Street to the square to eat. And my mother lived on Odell Street, and so she was checking all the guys out, marching by every day.
I'd never heard that before. That is interesting.
Yeah, they were here. They took over the dorms, and there was quite a few of them here. And they used to have reunions, but too many of them have passed away. They don't do that anymore. But anyway, somehow she picked out my father, and he went away and served. And when he came back, we were here in Marshall for a little bit. And then we moved to California, where he was from and my grandparents were from. And we all lived together. So it was Carl Sr., Carl Jr., and Carl III, all in one house. And my grandfather said, "There's too many Carls around here. Your name is Bub." So that's how I got Bub, and my mother started calling me Bub. And so when your mother calls you Bub, everybody calls you Bub.
I'll be darned. That's a great story.
So we lived there for a while. Then Mom got homesick, I guess, and moved back to Marshall. My dad went to work for my grandfather in the construction business, and my grandfather passed away, and my dad took over. Well, he liked building houses better than commercial buildings, big buildings. So he kind of got out of that and started building houses. He got Hodgkin's disease. Back then, there wasn't a cure for that. He passed away when I was 11. And my mother, always being in the construction business and around it, took over and kept building houses. And then a guy named Will Young came to town looking for people he was working for a company called Black Stibbles and Bryson that was in the oil field tank business. And back then there was a government program. The government was paying farmers all over the United States to store grain because there was a big fear that we were going to run out of food. So the government was subsidizing grain storage. So this oil field tank company decided to get in the grain bin business, and they sent Will Young out to find dealers and contractors to sell and put up grain storage. So he comes to Marshall and starts asking around about who's a good contractor, and people sent him to my mother. And of course, he was quite surprised. Here was this lady running a construction company. And so anyway, he talked her into putting up grain bins. And next thing you know, he was at the house quite a bit. And next thing you know, they got married, and he quit Black Stibbles and Bryson, and my mom got out of the home building business, and they started the W.B. Young Company out of the basement of our house. So everybody asks how long I've been working for W.B. Young Company, and I say since I was 13 years old. So as an interesting sideline, back then, Cliff, people that know anything about grain bins, well, there's one hell of a lot of bolts and nuts in a grain bin. And back then, they didn't have the washers, the sealing washers on the bolts. So my sister and I and my mother and Will and I would sit around at night watching TV and put these washers on the bolts so that the crew wouldn't have to do it and it could speed things up. So that was my first job, putting washers on bolts.
How did it evolve from there?
It was just a slow process. I mean, Will Young he traveled and he was out pounding on doors, and Mom was kind of in charge of putting the bins up, and he started selling bins, and he set up some dealers to help him sell bins for us. And we were in the house for several years. And then we finally purchased some property on South Odell and put up a small shop and warehouse. And then over the years, we've expanded on that property considerably. I worked, as soon as I turned 16, child labor laws weren't too strict back then. So I started driving trucks, to the job sites. So, and then I got a bunch of my buddies, and we all worked construction in the summertime. So I learned how to pour concrete and put up bins. And then I went away to MU and was there for a while. Maybe had too good a time. Ended back up at Missouri Valley College. Decided I'd had enough of Central Missouri. So being a golfer I am, I decided to go some school in the South. So I picked the University of Houston, and I was smart enough to realize that, I'm maybe not as good as golfer as I think, and where could I get a good job afterwards? And Houston was just starting to boom in the petrochemical and oil business back then in the mid-'60s. So off I went, being a young, dumb kid from Marshall, Missouri to Houston. And that was a cultural shock and awakening.
I bet it was.
So, and going from a town of 10,000 people to, couple million, well, that was quite interesting, and a big school. So anyway, I graduated from University of Houston, and then I went to work in the petrochemical industry for a couple of years, and then I got a job in the packaging industry. And I might tell you this side story, how I changed jobs. I was working for this company and I got passed over for a promotion, and I went in to see the boss, and I said, "How come I didn't get this job? I'm better than he is." And he looked at me and said, "Yes, you're right, you are. But your family has a business back in Missouri, and you're going to be back in Missouri one of these days, and this guy's going to be here." And I said, "Bull, that ain't happening. I'm not going home. I'm happy here." Well, he was right.
And so back you came.
Yeah, I worked for this other company for a couple of years, and they were a West Coast company, and they decided they had expanded into the eastern part of the United States, and they decided to pull back their horns. And they said, "We want to keep you. We want you to move either to Los Angeles or San Francisco." And I said, "I'm not going either place." And so I called up my folks, and back I came. So I've been back here since I don't remember exactly, 75 or 76. I've been back.
So you really did grow up in that business, went away to school. Today you own farms and you run a business that's really all about agriculture. And of course, agriculture is Missouri's largest industry. How's it feel to have been involved in all this for so many years? It's got to be a great feeling.
It's been a great experience seeing the company grow and helping it grow. I actually have been running my Will Young died in 98. He was sick a couple of years before that. So my mother and I ran the company, and then she passed away. So I've been pretty much running the company since 97, 98. So we've made a lot of changes. We've really, really grown. I've seen some opportunities and able to take advantage of them. That goes for the business and the farm ground. My grandfather actually had 225 acres between here and Slater. And of course, my mom bought out her brother and sister, and then a piece of ground came up next door, so we bought that, and then another piece came up, bought that, and then one day I went to an auction, and there was a piece down the road, so I ended up buying that, and then a couple of years later bought another piece, and a couple of years later bought another piece. So we've got about 1,000 acres now, and it's great. I love it gives me something to talk about, not with our farm customers. I can sit down and talk to them about the price of fertilizer and the cost of seed and what helps build a relationship with our grain bin customers, and so I go to all the commodity groups. We're a member of the Missouri Soybean, the Missouri Corn Growers, MOAG. So I go to all the meeting, and that's a fabulous way to meet people and stay in touch with everybody in agriculture. And the Governor's Conference on Agriculture, you get to meet a lot of the high rollers. And so I've made a lot of contacts, over the years, being involved in the farming and in the ag business also.
It sounds like you've really developed a nice network of people to do business with and that influence other people to buy from you, perhaps. I was in a business discussion with some people last night, ironically, and one of the guys said, it just seems like it's harder to do business today than it used to be. And, seems like most everybody agreed with that. Do you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. It's difficult. I mean, trying to start a new business now and trying to contact people, there's so many firewalls out there to keep you from, contacting people. And of course, we had COVID, and that stopped all the conventions and meetings and things. And there's a lot of firewalls out there to developing contacts.
So tell us about W.B. Young. Tell us about, maybe you've talked about the history and how it came about. Tell us about some of your products, maybe how you distribute and market them.
Well, our primary business is grain storage and grain handling equipment. We sell pretty much all over the state. We don't go down to the boot hill. There's just no good way to get to the boot hill. We do a little business out in Kansas, a little bit in southern Iowa, close to the borders, and selling and erecting grain storage and grain handling facilities. We also sell to commercial elevators like, well, the big one in Missouri is MFA. That's one of our big customers. We also work in fertilizer plants, dog food plants, animal feed plants. MFA has a large number of feed mills. We do an awful lot of work for them. Back in agriculture is seasonal and cyclical, and you can have a drought or a government program that's either pro farmers or anti farmers, and that can affect your business no matter how smart you are. You can't outguess government programs. So back in the 90s, things were pretty slow, and there was a company called Standard Havens over in Glasgow that was making asphalt plants, and they were busy in the winter. And I was talking to their assistant manager one day somewhere, I'm not sure where, and they said, "Can you make some tanks for us?" And I said, "Well, I don't see why not." And so we got together and we started making a few parts for them in the winter, which was great because that's always the ag slow time. We can't do a lot of construction work or in the wintertime. So we started making asphalt plant equipment and some pollution control equipment. And then they spun off the pollution control company, and we started making all kinds of what they call bag houses for that company. And then Standard Havens ended up shutting down, and a lot of their engineers went to other places, and so they'd call up and say, "Hey, can you make this for us? And can you make that?" And we go, "Yeah." So we've really expanded into the pollution control and asphalt plant replacement business. That's been a big part of our job shop work. And then I could see the writing on the wall. We were just, shearing and punching stuff. So we got to figure out some other way to cut this stuff faster. So we bought a laser cutter, which was fairly new technology back in the late 90s. And that really changed our business, our fabrication business. That speeded up our process, made us much more competitive. The parts were more accurate, and now we have 2 laser cutters. One of them's almost brand new, and it can cut up to 1-inch thick steel, and it's quite a sophisticated piece of equipment. Very expensive, but it enables us to be very competitive. We actually ship some of these asphalt plants to California, some to New Jersey, and it's amazing that we ship these big asphalt plant pieces all over the United States. So that's been a big part of keeps us busy all year round, and the ag business has been very, very good. I mean, ethanol and biodiesel have spurred on the farm storage, where they used to ship it here, there, and everywhere. Now, we've got this wonderful ethanol plant in Malta Bend, and it uses, 50 some million bushel of corn a year, and the farmers are storing their crops on the farm, and that's been a real boom for our business.
Well, it also sounds like you kind of became vertically integrated over time by doing things that you used to have other people do, but it just made more sense for you to do it. I think you've built up a nice business model, Bub. So if I understand what you've said there, you pretty much sell all of your products directly to the end user. Is that correct?
Yes, it didn't used to be that way. We used to have had a kind of a dealer network, but the systems got so complicated. Used to be a guy'd put up a 5,000 bushel bin. That was great, but now that people are putting up 100,000 bushel of storage and a bucket elevator and dryers, and so that got over the head of most people. What we had set up as dealers, we pretty much sell direct, right?
Yeah. One of the things that I've been hearing is all the relationships that you've developed And you talked about the company that went out of business and these engineers go to different places, but they take that relationship that they have with you there. And now you've got new customers growing there too. So I think that's a really neat story of how you've strategically grown your business over these years. So I know you have a strong personal and professional network with customers and potential customers throughout the state. Do you do any other kinds of marketing activities that help support that sales effort?
Well, we go to some conventions. Our big show is the Western Farm Show in Kansas City, and we have a very large exhibit there. We do have an exhibit at the state fair. Anymore, that's not as productive, even though I love the state fair. But the state fair is in August, and we're sold out. Used to be a guy could walk in the state fair and we could get him a 5,000 bushel bin, by the middle of September. Well, that's not the case anymore. So unfortunately, the state fair is not a big deal for us, but there in Moag has a convention and we'll have an exhibit, and some county shows. We'll take an auger or something to a county fair. But the Western Farm Show in Kansas City, there's people from all of Kansas, Missouri, Iowa. Everybody shows up at that. That's our big show, and it's in February.
That's a great show.
Yeah, usually by after that, middle of March, 1st of April, we're pretty much sold out for the year. And that's mostly due to the lack of help. We're like everybody else. We just can't find the help. There's business out there. And it's unfortunate that we can't grow our business, anymore because we just don't have the help to keep customers happy.
Well, I can relate 100% to that. We keep having good years. There's lots of business out there, but you just can't do any more capacity than what you can do. And I don't know how it's going to change. I hope that it does, because I could see our economy really getting going if people could find the people to do the work, but I just don't know where they are. In working these conventions and trade shows, and we've been to that Western Farm Show several times. That's a great show for the ag industry. Do you have a sales team that work these shows? How's that work?
We have 2 full-time ag salesmen in our office. We have a full-time guy that takes care of the job shop, manufacturing, and we have a full-time parts department, and that helps immensely with keeping customers happy and keeping customers coming back. So customers come back to us for parts, and they'll walk in and get some parts, and salesman will be right there next to the parts counter and start talking, and, well, give me a price on a grain bed. In our office, we have the salesman, parts counter, and, of course, our warehouse where people can come pick up parts and equipment.
Sounds like you got the setup that people need. So your company became an ESOP some time ago. What does that mean for the future of your company?
What people don't know, ESOP stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan. These plans were started back in the late 80s, early 90s, as I understand it. It's basically a succession plan and a retirement plan for employees. I did not have any heirs that wanted to take over the company. I looked at selling the business, because I wasn't going to work forever. Due to the length the company had been in business, we had quite a list of assets, and selling the assets would have generated serious capital gains taxes. And somebody else would have come in and taken over, and I wasn't crazy about that because I have a lot of people that had worked for us for a long time, and I didn't want them to, be mistreated and leave or get fired or anything. So I heard about this ESOP concept. So I called up Ron Toner, Ron, and said, what do you know about ESOPs? Well, a little bit. So he started digging, and we started digging around, trying to find information. We ended up hiring a law firm out of Kansas City. And basically what you sell the company to the employees. And that way they get stock in the company every year depending on their salary. They get so many shares each year depending on the salary. What happens is, what's a share of stock a W.B. Young company worth? And there is no really good answer because we're not a publicly traded corporation. So what happens is you hire a independent auditor valuation firm. We have to provide them all kinds of information, and they come up with the value of the company. And there's so many shares, so you divide the shares into the value of the company, and that gives you a dollar per share. And depending on how much your salary was, you may get 10 shares, you may get 100 shares, and based on, the value of the stock. I will tell you that we started this 10 years ago, the value of the stock was zero. The value of the stock this last year was about $38. So that's a pretty nice increase in 10 years for the value of a share of stock.
Sure is.
And employees do not pay anything. All they got to do is work hard and generate a profit, that's their motivation to work and make the company successful. So the value of their stock, and keeps increasing every year. So, we got employees now after 10 years that have a lot of money in stock in the W.B. Young company. I do not have a single share of stock in the company. I think that's important for the employees. I'm not taking their money. It's their company. It's really not mine anymore. I'm still the president, but it's their company.
That's exciting. So they have all the incentive in the world to grow that thing as big and make it as profitable as possible. What happens when they're ready to retire? What happens then?
They can cash in that stock, or they can roll it over into another IRA, or like any defined benefit plan. They have the same options.
So there are lots of ways to transition a business, right? You chose an ESOP to take care of your employees and to provide for the longevity of the business, smooth transition. I just think that makes a lot of sense.
It does, and especially if anybody's listening that has a company, if you're asset rich, maybe you don't have a lot of cash, but we had lots and lots of money in assets, and that's really a great way to divest, yourself, and you're financially rewarded, and then your employees are financially rewarded also.
It's a great approach. So is this something that will always be in place then for W.B. Young?
Well, I've talked to some people about, like our banker I was meeting with a couple of weeks ago. He said, "Can we grow this company?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I'd like to." And I told him about the help, but he said, "Well, what about buying another company?" And I said, "Well, that's an option, or somebody buying us." That would have to be subject to, I guess the vote of the stockholders, but W.B. Young could buy another company, or another company could buy W.B. Young. The employees would still have their money. That's something that's in the back of my mind, like, what are we going to do? We're going to buy somebody, let somebody buy us. It's not something I'm actively working on, but it's in my mind.
Well, you never know. And it's good to be always thinking ahead. You've been in business a long time. You've been in the ag industry. What do you see going on today that kind of gets you excited about the future of agriculture?
Well, and the big thing, and it's always been, people got to eat. It's just a matter of getting the food we grow distributed, which is a problem. But the big thing that's happening in agriculture is what they call precision agriculture, where they're using drones and satellites, to map the fields, to figure out how much fertilizer and chemical apply. They can break it down per acre. Well, we're going to put this much fertilizer on this acre. Well, this acre doesn't need that much fertilizer, so we don't need to put as much there. And the seed varieties it's just amazing how the crops can tolerate heat and drought and everything and still produce, a crop. It's just phenomenal, the technology that's taken over agriculture. It's truly amazing. And every week you read something, somebody's got something, new chemical or new seed or, to help grow more corn beans to feed the world. Of course, the bad news is a lot of people don't think we ought to be using GMO corn and, people don't like GMO tomatoes but it's all proven to be safe and it's a whole lot cheaper to produce.
And there's a need for it.
Definitely.
Well, it is interesting to see how technology is really just driving innovation in every industry, and certainly agriculture is no exception. You lived in a big city, you live, work, and play in rural America. And I know you like to travel and go fun places as well, but why do you live, work, and play in rural America?
Well, of course, I have a business here and gotten into farming, and I like being involved in that. We love the Lake of the Ozarks. I have a house there, and that's one of the most exciting places in the world to be.
It is, and it's going and growing.
Yeah. We do travel a lot in the wintertime. Been all over the United States, been to Mexico, but it's great getting back home. Like I told you, I love the state fair. I love MU football. I love MU basketball. And I love the Royals, the Chiefs. I can be just about anywhere I want in 2 or 3 hours from Marshall if I want to go to St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield. We're centrally located, and then when I get home, I got peace and quiet, and I have a good life.
It's a pretty good way to go. I agree. Hey, Bub, I've really enjoyed visiting with you. I've learned a lot about your business and your perspectives on business today. What else would you like to share with our OutDrive audience that you think they might find interesting or maybe inspiring?
I am not a real innovative guy, but if I see something, I think I can do that. I can do that better. I've been really blessed to be able to kind of see things that are happening in the world and say, I can do that and I can do that well. It's just paying attention to what's going on in the world. I read a whole lot all the time, read about everything. And it just kind of keeps me in the loop, up to speed on what's happening in the world. It gives me more options to pick and choose which direction I want to go.
So your advice to our audience is read everything they get their hands on.
I think that helps. I mean, that's nobody wants to read. Everybody wants to watch a YouTube video and TikTok or whatever.
That is the truth. That's where everybody's going for their information. I'm with you, buddy. I love to read. I read a lot as well. There's a lot of interesting stories, a lot of great stories out there, but there's a lot of insight that you can get from the written word.
I agree.
Well, Bub, appreciate you being with us today. I've enjoyed our conversation.
Me too, Cliff. Thanks for having me, and I'll see you on the golf course somewhere.
I look forward to it. Hey, folks, thanks for listening to OutDrive. I hope you've enjoyed our visit today with Bub Caldwell, president of WB Young. Come back again next week, and I'll take you down the roads of rural America, where it's heaven on earth.
Thanks for taking a ride with us on OutDrive. This episode is complete, so head on over to ecallis.com for more insight you can apply to help drive your business growth. And be sure to sign up for our free monthly e-letter, OutThink, for even more helpful content about marketing to rural America. Have a great day and keep on driving.